Thank you for all coming here tonight. My topic is international adoption, whether it's the best solution, the only solution, or no solution at all. God sets the lonely in families. Psalm 68:6. This simple statement of scripture can be understood as encouragement or instruction. I've been encouraged because that is my experience as an adopted son. Many adoptive parents, including my own, have received it as instruction, or what God was guiding them to do. And there's much to be done. With over 150 million orphans in the world, every day more than 38,000 orphans age out of the system. That means each year, 14 million children pass from orphan into adulthood without the benefit of a family. No model for a home life. Adoption is a powerful solution for setting a lonely child in a family. 1/3 of adoptions involve bringing together children and parents from different countries in 2 steps. The first one, legally adopting a child from a foreign country, and the second one, bringing that child to live into your country permanently. International adoption is largely a development happening after World War I. It involves a long, complex process taking 1 to 3 years, and an expensive one, costing $15,000 to $35,000. In addition to time and money, there's a ton of paperwork involved. Before we consider the impact of adoption, let's look at the motivation for Christians. We have 4 angles to observe: Bible, history, worldview, and denominations. Adoption has a steady and positive witness among the followers of Christ. The Bible is clear. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. James 1:27. Surely adoption is a true application of the second great commandment given in the Old Testament. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Leviticus 19:18. This very same love is to be given to foreigners. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love the stranger as yourself. Leviticus 19:34. The scriptures add further weight to the understanding that we, as Christians, should care for orphans, also called fatherless, and by extension, support adoption. Many passages in the Bible, by application, promote orphan care and adoption. One such account is found in the Gospel of Matthew, which records the words of Jesus describing how deeds done for the least of these are really done for him. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Matthew 25:37-40. Does not the very act of adoption bundle together many of these righteous deeds? Feed you, give you drink, take you in, clothe you, and come to you? Children have always been vulnerable, especially orphans. In ancient days, the primary way of disposing of unwanted children was exposure. Abandoned offspring were often left to die, unless a Christian found them first. As early as AD 110, the care of orphans is listed among the duties of elders by Christian bishop and martyr Polycarp. German Reformation leader Martin Luther and his wife Catherine, in addition to raising their 6 biological children, adopted 4 more after their mother died from the plague. Englishman George Mueller, at age of 30, established the first of 5 orphan houses, which eventually supported over 10,000 orphans on the strength of his faith and prayer. A new movie provides a contemporary application of this ancient conviction about adoption. The Christian worldview is expressed well in the recent documentary film, The Dropbox. The young director, Brian Ivey, became a Christian while making this movie, which tells the story of a South Korean pastor, Lee Jong-rak, who set up a Dropbox at the front of his church to rescue babies that would otherwise be abandoned. Ivey explained, I'm hoping people see a type of love that spends itself on behalf of others and doesn't expect anything back, because that's what God's love is like. It can be plainly demonstrated that adoption, as well as the concept of sanctity of life, are distinctly and historically Christian concepts. In surveying the four major Christian denominations, we see how broadly adoption is affirmed. Orthodox Christians believe that the woman who is to conceive should take care of that child until it is born. If she is unable to take care of the child after it is born, she will be supported to find an alternative for the baby in adoption. Evangelicals believe that the adoption is at the very heart of God, who adopts us into his family. Roman Catholic convictions were communicated by Pope John Paul II in these words: "To adopt a child is the great work of love. When it is done, much is given, but much is also received. It is a true exchange of gifts." Methodists, a mainline denomination also known as Wesleyans, believe it is important to recognize people are worthy of God's creation and to serve the poor and the children. The impact of international adoption is far and vast. The local impact for kids is this: the place of adoption is at a very supportive and secure home life. It is a chance for having something better. Adopting a child will make their future brighter and also will give them a life they never would have been able to have if they had not been adopted. One survey shows that 83% of adopted children consider their situation to be positive. Personally, it is an amazing thing to be adopted. Adoption is the best option for anyone who can't be taken care of in their birth home or birth country. I visited my birthplace in April 2014 with a missionary to act as a translator. I was able to go back to the hospital where I was placed before my first birthday. There I was able to talk with one of the nurses who took care of me 15 years earlier. My family thought the focus of our trip was to reconnect with my past. The nurse, however, offered a different perspective. She was so gratified to learn the condition of someone whom she had cared for as an infant. The nurse pronounced me as one of the lucky ones and said she was overjoyed to know I have a future. At the national level, adoption promotes the wellness and social and economic well-being of the nation. Institute for Adoption reveals as many as 100 million American families have been impacted by adoption. About 7 million children in America are adopted, both domestic and international. Of the three primary ways to adopt children in the United States, 1 in 4 of them is international adoption. The global impact may be described by sending nations and receiving nations. Many of the primary sending nations face challenges of poverty and instability. Many circumstances intensify the misery of orphans: war, failed governments, poverty, dislocation, AIDS, and politics. Because children are at risk as never before, international adoption is good for everyone involved. The country that has many parentless children needs to find a beneficial solution for their children. The adoptive parents, often from more prosperous nations, are willing to give their child a better future. The United States is the leading receiving country for children adopted from many nations. The total number of adoptions in 2010 was 11,100. It may be surprising to learn, however, that the United States is also a sending country in the world of international adoption. While thousands of children have come to the U.S., there are hundreds that have been adopted out, mostly to Canada and Europe. Most of these adoptees are not technically orphans. In most cases, the birth mothers are poor and have issues with drugs or abuse. They perceive an advantage for their child growing up in a prosperous family in a country that will not discriminate on the basis of race. The motivation for international adoption is the same: to provide a better life than would be possible given the circumstances of the birth mother. With the compassion, sacrifice, and positive impact of international adoption, who could oppose it? Actually, there are concerns, criticism, and cautions that must be heard. Some concerns that are voiced about international adoption come from Christians. As a Christian professor, David Smolin found fault with some in the evangelical movement who uncritically participate in the adoption systems riddled with child laundering, where children are illicitly obtained through fraud, kidnapping, or purchase. Bethany Christian Service President Bill Bulcare acknowledged, "A lot of people opened up shop and did adoptions quick and easy and made a lot of money. That's not how adoption should be done. It's not supposed to be easy." Secular magazine Mother Jones reported a serious criticism of international adoption in an article entitled Orphan Fever, the Evangelical Movement Adoption Obsession. The report reflected on how flawed the system can become, especially in countries like Liberia, where adoption was unregulated. Evangelicals occasionally have acted naively, but the focus on a few bizarre examples ignore the majority of good ones. In response, David French said, "To the person who condemns my orphan fever, I'd ask them what they would have done to save the life of my child. Nothing. Of course, it's always nothing. Sure, they might tweet for social justice or maybe even toss a few pennies at UNICEF, but that would have no impact on the very real crisis that is happening right now to very real people." Several adoption agencies, like Bethany Christian Services, act with integrity in their attempts to reconnect families and facilitate domestic adoption or foster care before considering international adoption. International adoption is not the only solution, for there are far too many orphans. The compassion that motivated most adoptive parents was guided by professional practices. My parents were required to undergo a thorough home study and conducted by a licensed social worker, in addition to filling out many legal documents both in the U.S. and Romania. Kelsey Macklin, an adoptee from China, cautions us about international adoption. Don't negate the painful aspects of adoption. Be careful with using adoption as a spiritual allegory. Consider the other side of the story and don't criticize the adoptee's original culture, society, or family. Such observations provide realistic balance to adoption that can often be idealized due to its noble nature. Dr. Patricia Kogan, a family therapist, offers resources such as books, a website, and support groups for adopting families. Let's face it, raising children is intense, or so I've been told again and again. Add to the mix, adoption and new issues are introduced. With international adoption, even more challenges are encountered. What are some next steps and solutions that will benefit all involved in international adoption? International adoption may not be the only solution, but it is by far the best. Consider the scope of the issue. If all orphans formed one country, it would be the 10th largest country in the world. Charity Sub reports, every 22 seconds another child becomes an orphan. Most of these kids live in the developing world far from our view. They are voiceless, isolated, and unsafe. Without intervention, most are fated to continue the cycle of poverty that left them orphaned to begin with. Individuals are more aware of attachment theory, which focuses on the need for any child to bond with his or her parents. Attachment is based on security, proximity, and safety. Another worthy action available to churches in America is providing support for orphan ministries. While visiting an orphanage in Romania last year, I met a girl named Cornelia, a young woman only a few years older than me. She had not had the privilege of being adopted, but Cornelia was touched by the Christians from the USA, who established a support ministry in Romanian orphanages. The care she received include vital job skills, enabling her to serve orphans today. Heart to Heart, for 20 years, has provided orphan ministries and arranges several trips each year for Christians from the States to serve orphans in Romania. Another development benefiting international adoption is policies in both sending and receiving countries that better serve the needs of prospective adopters. In the past 10 years, the Christian Adoption and Orphan Care Movement has formed the Christian Alliance for Orphans in 2004 to promote proper practices. On the international front, the Hague Convention establishes international guidelines that prevent child exploitation and promote international adoption. Changes in adoption law are serving to accomplish adoption at the earliest stage possible in the life of the child. A renewed commitment from governments to improve conditions for the children who will not be adopted is also necessary. Romania, my birth country, was forced to suspend international adoptions in order to qualify for admittance into the European Union. When Russia closed adoptions to the U.S. due to political tension, the Russian Orthodox Church urged its citizens to adopt Russian children. Adoption expert Elizabeth Bartlett explains that the children's most fundamental interests are in being raised in a loving, nurturing manner in the context of a permanent family, and that these interests can best be served by giving them homes that often will only be available in international adoption. These children come from many countries, but all arrive in a loving family with the desire and resources to provide a healthy and happy home life. Above all the controversy and beyond all the complications, I offer my viewpoint. For me, adoption was the only option other than death. I was saved out of Romania by my adoptive parents because God told them that I was the one, and so they did for me what no one else would. They gave me the best solution when they made me their adopted son. With more knowledge about international adoption, we may better understand the challenges. With greater compassion, we may better act, showing support for those who struggle, offering acceptance to those who are different than us, and always remembering, adopting one child won't change the world, but for that child, the world will change. Thank you very much.